Cool.
It's exactly 1:30. You think people come in a little bit late?
Yeah, and people will probably, again, that's how it works, is people will just kind of add on as we're going through it. And so
Okay.
let's get started, and then they can jump on. We've recorded it, so they can go back, and if they miss anything in the beginning, that's okay.
Okay.
So Tony, Nicole, Linnea, welcome to the community call. We're really excited about today. Our friend Elaine Marino is speaking about diversity, attracting diversity, retaining diversity, and different things that we can be doing. This has been a big discussion in our co-working space, and I know is a big discussion, especially in the tech world. Elaine has a lot of experience with this, both good and bad, a little bit, and I think we'll hear a little bit about that today. We've been friends with Elaine for a long time. She helped actually us get started. She hosted a organization called Go Code Colorado, so she put on the event, and Elaine is a rock star. So we're really excited to hear from her. Elaine, I'll let you take it over, and then just one house cleaning thing. If you can remember, please put your microphone on mute, and then unmute your microphone if you want to say anything. That's totally fine, but it just kind of keeps all the background noise out of it so that we can hear better. So awesome. Elaine, I will let you take it over.
Okay, thanks, Brian. You guys are so great. Okay, so my name is Elaine Marino, and the title of this is slightly different, but basically I'm going to talk to you about building a diverse ecosystem. And just a quick little background on me. I actually came from advertising, and on the left is Mad Men, and on the right are the last group of gentlemen I worked for. And I love showing this because, as you've seen, like really nothing has changed at the top in advertising. But what was very different as I transitioned careers to technology is that the percentage of women in advertising, PR, and related services is 56%. And frankly, the numbers for the rest of diversity as well are much higher than they are in tech. And so in my everyday world, I worked in a diverse workforce. But then I got to tech, and I was I got into tech, and I had a one day, like on the job, come see what it's like to be a software developer from my mentor. And he invited me to his software development firm. And this is what my first stand up looked like. It was me and all men. And I had not been introduced to the industry before, and I was really surprised. And not only was it all men, everybody was about the same age. No one had any sort of ethnic diversity. Everyone seemed to have gone to the same schools and had the same socioeconomic background. And it was really, really narrow. So it wasn't just gender and race. It was also age. I happened to be like one of the older people in the room. At me and my mentor, I'm pretty sure we're the only people over the age of 35. And so it was just really surprising on multiple levels. And so I got very involved in this discussion and doing women in tech events. So just very quickly, what I learned that day is that diversity, yes, it does mean gender and it means race, but it also means age. And tech has a real problem with age diversity, as we'll go through. That means class. You know, I actually think this is the real underlying problem of tech's diversity issue, is that we're all pulling from the same high-level universities, and only certain people go to those high-level universities. And so it's really a socioeconomic and access issue for diverse candidates. Religion, not a lot of religious diversity. It also includes the disabled, the LGBTQ community, and veterans. And frankly, that day in the stand-up, the company failed on all of those groups of people. And it also, it's not just that company, right? It's the whole industry. And so I'm going to actually take you through the industry. And what I like to say is this is my presentation as an insider and an outsider, because I did become a software developer and go and deep dive on the inside, but I was also an outsider because I had already had a career in advertising. I'd already had a separate career. So this is from Oren Teach. He's the COO of Heroku, or was the COO of Heroku. And there were so few women at the Heroku conference, the first one that they put on, that they had more men named Matt in attendance than they did women. And the press asked him about it. They said, "What does this mean?" And he said, "The number isn't what matters. It's an indicator that something is wrong, and that matters." And I 100% agree. It's not that having a room full of men is wrong. It's where is everyone else? There are a lot of talented people out there in the world. And so I'm just going to give a brief overview of the industry because I think it really surprises people. You know, it's a hot topic, but people don't really have a fundamental understanding of just how dire it is. So the current ecosystem is that the tech industry is exploding. We add almost 10,000 jobs a month in the United States, just purely in tech. And between 2009 and 2015, over 800,000 STEM jobs were added to the US economy. And by 2018, another 1.2 million jobs will be added. So they'll be with an average salary of $78,000. Actually, I need to move my camera. I can't see my slides. There we go. So this is just the same portrait, and you can kind of see this is from the U.S. Bureau of Labor and Statistics. And for Colorado specifically, you can see that we're almost the second highest, right? We're going from 12,000 to 24,000 within 5 years in jobs. So in 2014, this was sort of revolutionary. Google decided to publish its diversity and inclusion numbers, and they were really shockingly bad. Now, women in tech, you'll see there is 17%, and that actually tracks about accurate the whole way through at most companies, and I'll show you that in a minute. But here's what surprised me. So you have 17% women, leadership is almost 80% men, and then overall, we're talking overall, marketing, sales, operations is 2% Black and 3% Hispanic. Like it is shockingly low. We're not even talking tech. If you go over one column to tech, it's 1% Black and 2% Hispanic. So in non-tech roles, in leadership roles, you're talking 1 to 2% Black and Hispanic. Like I was really, really surprised by these numbers. So let's look overall. Uber's 15%. This is for women. Facebook 17, Apple 23, Google 19, Twitter 15, Microsoft 17.5%. So you can see they all track about the same, and it's all really low. It's under 20% for the most part. Apple is an outlier, but even still, women make up 53% of the workforce. Percentage overall by race, and this is a harder slide to see, but again, it tracks 2 and 3% Black and Hispanic across the board at all these major companies. And again, it's really, really surprising. And Asian, while they do track higher, it's not as high as people think it is. They're usually about 25% of the workforce. So Google, since 2014, has really tried to increase its numbers, and it hasn't been very successful. Black staff at Google has stayed static at 2%, and Hispanic has gone from 2% to 4%, and women have gone from 17% to 20%. So with all that money and all that energy and all that effort, you're still seeing really low numbers. Gender, this is a Stack Overflow study. You'll see there's 55,000 responses to Stack Overflow's study. Only 5.8% of those responses were women, and they felt that this trended so low that they had to qualify it and say, well, we did not see people, women from Asian countries such as South Korea, India, and China answer our survey, and they would bump up the number of women. So not women in the United States, but women in South Korea, India, and China were the ones that brought the number down. And honestly, 5.8% is about what you're seeing inside software development firms. Sure, they're at 17% in tech roles, but tech roles tend to include project management. They tend to include front-end roles like designer, not necessarily deep developer roles. Age, this is always fascinating to me. The average age of a developer is 29.6 years old, and the median age is 27. And so this is what I saw when I was at these software development firms. I'm like, wow, everyone is like a 27-year-old white guy that's standing here. And that's not to say there's anything wrong with 27-year-old white guys, because we love Brian. But where is everyone else, right? So the other problem with tech is there's a leaky faucet problem. Women and minorities tend to leave. And I have this great quote. I love coding. I have a master's in computer science. I worked in tech for 2 decades. So many women like me, so highly trained, and for what? It was hard enough being the only woman on most projects. Try being the only woman over 40. It doesn't matter how good you are, or even if your colleagues respect you, eventually you get tired of being the odd duck. I took all my experience and started my own thing where I could make the rules. I'm never going back. And what you see is over and over and over again, women leaving because they get tired of being the odd duck. Only 3% say they would definitely like to stay in tech. It's very, very low. So you have both a pipeline issue and you have a leaky faucet issue. I'm going fairly quickly. Hold on, sorry. So what you see is that the industry reflects its leadership. It is pretty much Mark Zuckerberg. It is young, it is white, and it is predominantly male across the board at all companies. What this has tended to do is create a very closed ecosystem where all they're doing is poaching and incentivizing their talent. And so it creates an even worse ecosystem of entitlement. So have some dry cleaning, have some hot food, wear your slippers in the office. We're going to pay you to go on vacation. All of these are very, very common practices in Silicon Valley and even in Colorado. So the ecosystem is that there's a talent shortage, right? The first slides showed how much growth there is on these jobs. There's a diversity shortage, right? Because the talent doesn't already exist in these companies. And then what little talent they do have, they don't keep, they leave. So that is how the current ecosystem works. So why is company culture important to diversity and inclusion? And in this case, also, why is it important to co-working spaces, right? So when I say company in this presentation, I also want you to think about it in terms of the co-working space. So company culture tends to reflect its majority, and this is what you see a lot of, right? Beer and pizza and ping pong and foosball and hoodies, and words like ninja and scooters, and that alienates anyone else that is not that does not find these things to be who they are and what they identify with. So I did a Google image search on Patagonia, the company, and this is what came up, right? And what you see is their culture is extremely strong, and it is led by their leadership. And since 1983, they have had on-site childcare. And what that has translated to is, sorry, I'm skipping ahead, is to 50% women at Patagonia and 50% women in leadership positions versus Uber, who has been in the news and has huge problems, is only at 15.4% women. And so what you see is that company culture reflects the values of a company, and it reflects the tone that is set by leadership, right? And so what I would encourage all of you that run co-working spaces is to think about the values of your co-working space and the tone that you're setting. And is it inclusive of people that are outside the majority? Because even if your co-working space is the majority of one type of person, you don't want to just cater your culture to that one type of person because that's the only people that are going to work there. You have to actually cater the culture to who you want to be there. So if you want more women, you have to have things that are attractive to more women. And the same thing for minorities. And we'll go through some of that. I skipped ahead through these slides. So essentially, company culture sets the daily tone. So the same thing for your co-working spaces. That culture is setting the daily tone, and it reflects your leadership, it reflects your core values, and it also reflects the majority of who are in your co-working spaces. So if you think of something like a Galvanize, those are all startups, right? And it reflects the Silicon Valley startup culture. Company culture attracts people who believe in that leadership and follow those core values, whether they're positive or negative. So at Uber was attracting more people that were like Travis Kalanick, right? They believed in him, they wanted to disrupt industries. And for Patagonia, for Yvon Chouinard, he attracted people that had held his core values, which are about family and saving the environment and making products that are good for the environment. So whether you set the tone or not, people are paying attention, and you will attract the people that believe in your core values, whether they're positive or negative. And then programs that reflect company culture have the power to increase diversity and inclusion, things like on-site childcare. So if you have programs in place that cater to a diverse and inclusive environment, they will come. So let's quickly talk about why diversity is valuable, because that's always not obvious to people. So there was a Harvard Business Review study of 24 top CEOs who had diversity on their agenda as a high ticket item. And they believed it was a business imperative because their companies needed it to stay competitive. And they believed it was a moral imperative because of their personal experiences and values. So what tends to happen is people that care about this have had some sort of experience in being the other, have being the odd duck or the outlier. So let's just kind of dive into how diversity helps businesses. Let's make the business case for it. So in 2011, Credit Suisse did this huge study about companies that survived the financial crisis the best. And the companies that had at least one woman director had a better share price performance than those companies without a woman for the last 6 years. And those 6 years were the meat of the financial crisis. So what they found is that women that were on the board of directors of companies, those companies survived and thrived during the recession. All right, so the data is clear about women in top management positions. An increase in share of women from 0 to 30% would be associated with a 15% rise in profitability. This is a huge study. It came out in 2016. And essentially what it's saying is that if you have 30% women in leadership positions, you are going to be at least 15% more profitable. They literally affect the bottom line. I always like this picture because I really think tech suffers from not having the been there, done that folks on their staff and in their organizations, because they make the same mistakes over and over again. And you need people who have failed and been frustrated and even survived catastrophe in order to push your products forward so that you don't keep making the same mistakes. People with different lifestyles and different backgrounds challenge each other more. Diversity creates dissent, and you need that. Without it, you're not going to get any deep inquiry or breakthroughs. This is one of the CEOs that was interviewed by the Harvard Business Review study. Marisant is the largest producer of sugar in the world. But I really like this. What the dirty little secret about diversity that no one wants to talk about is that diversity creates dissent, and nobody wants a dissenting opinion. Nobody wants to be questioned. And that's how you get a lot of yes men. That's how you get a lot of people nodding in agreement. However, you don't get the deep breakthroughs or inquiries because no one's questioning at the table. Same thing here. When disagreement comes from a socially different person, we are prompted to work harder. Diversity jolts us into cognitive action in ways that homogeneity simply does not. And I'm going to give an example of this. So imagine you have two women up on a stage, and you ask one woman to describe to the other woman, describe to me the pain of childbirth. And both these women are mothers, right? And what would happen in that moment is they'd probably laugh, and they'd probably answer the question by saying, well, I was in labor for 36 hours. How long were you in labor for? And they would jump to kind of the nitty gritty of their pain and what they went through. But if you replaced that woman with a man and you said, okay, now you need to describe to him the pain of childbirth, all of a sudden she has to take a step back and think about, well, what's the most painful thing you've experienced? And imagine if he said, well, I was shot in combat. So now you're having a much deeper discourse to get to the better answer, which is, what is the real pain of childbirth, right? So going back to this quote, when it comes from a socially different person, we're prompted to work harder. Diversity just jolts us into cognitive action, right? It makes you take a step back and think about, well, where is this person coming from? I can't just jump to the conclusion. So this is where I think class is a real issue. So Howard Schultz, the CEO of Starbucks, actually, he grew up poor in the projects of Brooklyn. He was the first in his family to go to college. He went to college on a basketball scholarship. His father was unemployed and disabled most of his life. And he has channeled that experience, his life's experience, into certain aspects of Starbucks that make it a pretty, so this quote, my father never got a chance to work for a company that respected him. He was an uneducated war veteran. In the back of my mind, I've been trying to build the kind of company that my father never got a chance to work for, right? So that's his life's experience. His distance traveled is now channeled into Starbucks. And what the manifestation of that thought is, and he has said this publicly, is why he gives full health care to part-time employees and why he gives stock options even to part-time employees, because he recognizes that the working class does not have access to that type of funds or those types of healthcare insurance, all because of his father and his life experience. So the value of diversity is innovation, it's creativity, it's better decision making, it's better problem solving. It improves the bottom line, like directly. They know it does. It leads to discoveries and it changes the way you think. And I think one of the most important things, and I do a longer presentation on this, going back to Howard Schultz, is when people talk about diversity of thought, this has come up recently. Oh, well, even though we're a whole room of white guys, we still have diversity of thought. And what I would say to that is you only have a diversity of thought if people have different life's experiences. So in Howard Schultz's example, he grew up poor. He grew up in the projects. He grew up without health insurance. He grew up struggling. He knew what it was like to go to bed hungry. So that is his distance traveled. So in that room of all white guys, if you have someone who's a veteran on staff, if you have someone who's seen combat, if you have someone who grew up poor, well, then you get the diversity of thought. But if everyone grew up middle class and went to really good universities and have two parents that are still together and don't have any sort of socioeconomic differences, well, then you're not getting the diversity of thought. You're still getting people that all are alike. Now, that is not to castigate those people. So I'll dive a little bit deeper into what that means. So what is proximity space's role and how are we doing on time? All right, I got to hustle here. So to not castigate those people. So when I talk about diversity of thought and having a room full of white guys, you have to understand that the ecosystem has created that lack of diversity, but what has happened is this. The real problem is not necessarily racism or sexism, but simply the fact that people like to hang out with others that are like themselves. And I am just as guilty of it as anyone else. The other day, I was at a presentation for a bunch of venture capitalists were presenting, and there were only like a couple of women in the room, and we all gravitated towards each other and started talking. Right? Because there's a comfort level there, right? It's very hard to step outside of your comfort level. And tech suffers from this at a monumental scale, right? They've created a system where they have software developers, they're poaching and incentivizing them, and they're only pulling from the same network of people they've always pulled from. And so the same thing with co-working spaces. If you want to diversify your co-working space, you have to reach outside your current network and start building relationships in new networks. So, for instance, build new networks. You can sponsor meetups, you can attend them and talk about your company. You keep going back and you encourage other people from your co-working space to attend and participate and mentor. Now, this is very specific to technology, but I swear this works across the board. And I'll show you a couple other examples. But these are like women in technology groups. And I'm always encouraging companies to, hey, go sponsor them, go talk to them, and keep going back. Create a relationship with these organizations. As I like to say, fish where the fish are. Make an authentic introduction. So for a lot of people, it is really super intimidating, especially if you are a white guy, to go to Latinas in STEM. You're like, what? Why do they want me? Like, what am I doing here? But make an authentic introduction and say, hey, I'm Brian from Proximity Space. We'd really like to host some of your meetups. We have great space available for you. If anyone has a business, then they're looking for co-working spaces. We have those options. And I'd love to come and speak and host food and beverages the next time that you are, meeting up. And so, and just, be really authentic and honest. And you can even say, and we'd really like, to have a more diverse co-working space. And we think your organization would, really fits with our values. Speak to diverse business groups. So I pulled all of these for the Colorado and Denver metro area. I'm not sure if everyone's from Colorado or not, but you can literally Google this. Look up the Hispanic Chamber in your area, look up the Black Chamber, the Veterans Business Network, the Women's Chamber, Women's Foundations, the LGBTQ communities in business. And same thing, reach out to them and ask if you can go speak at their next meetup and talk about your co-working space and what you have to offer and why it's great for them, and that you give a discount to veterans or, whatever it is. But make an authentic introduction and really reach outside your networks, because you're not going to meet them in your day-to-day lives. You're just not. We gravitate towards people that are like ourselves, period. I would also ask, are your spaces accessible? This is the Blind Institute of Technology. I happen to know the executive director, Mike Hess. He's blind, and his organization places blind software developers. And all his technology is accessible, and it's really, really interesting and fascinating. And so I would just assess your co-working spaces and make sure that they're handicap accessible. They're maybe talk to Mike or his organization or a similar organization and say, hey, what do blind people need in a co-working space? What are we missing here? The deaf as well, wheelchair bound. You have to remember too, I believe that it's 1/5 of the workforce is disabled. So it's definitely larger than we non-disabled folks think it is. I would also say let them find you. So set measurable goals for diversity and inclusion for your co-working space and keep track of the progress and publish your results to your website. And I swear to you, minorities will notice. If you say this is proximity space, we're really open to minority-owned businesses, we're really open to veterans, and we want to host your meetups and organizations, and here's the percentage of veteran-owned businesses we already have. Or we're looking to grow. And even if it's zero, say, look, we're really looking to grow, and we give you a percentage off. Your company and your co-working space will demonstrate that inclusion is a high priority and that you're paying attention. And I got to tell you, as a woman-owned business, you're looking for that. You're looking to see, oh God, is this just another place where they have beer and ping pong, or is this a place that has beer and ping pong, but it also has a discount for women-owned businesses, or it also has on-site childcare, or it also has yoga on Fridays, and what I would really encourage you to do is to put yourself in the mindset of the person or group or groups that you're trying to bring into your organization, and build your culture around that person. So if everyone in your organization is young and doesn't have children, and you want to make sure that you get people who are older, what do they need? What don't we have? Do we have enough parking spaces? Are we open at strange hours? Think about their needs and then make sure that you're implementing them. The other one is to have a code of conduct. This might not come up as much at co-working spaces, but again, it shows you're paying attention. I have tremendous statistics. Again, this is taken from a larger presentation and I'm sort of rushing through it, but I have tremendous statistics about how much more women and minorities are harassed in the workplace and online, and they have no way or recourse to speak up. And so what I really like about this PepsiCo one is not only do they have a code of conduct, they have an anonymous way to mention something. And I think that that's really important too. Because as a woman in particular, if something happens, you don't want to be the one that's like, the squeaky wheel. It's embarrassing and it can be difficult. And so have a way that's just, easy for people to say, hey, I witnessed this or I saw this and it's problematic. You also don't want to be blindsided. That's the other thing. Companies are being blindsided left and right because no one had an ability or a way for people to speak up that was non-intrusive. So the takeaways: build new networks, make an authentic introduction and sponsor and mentor and participate, and speak at groups and organizations where diverse companies congregate, like the Hispanic Chamber, the Black Chamber, veterans business groups. Publish your diversity numbers and the actions being taken to improve those numbers. Even if your numbers stink, publish them and say, we want to improve it. Here's what we're doing. Have a code of conduct and publish it, and have an anonymous way for employees to publish violations of that code of conduct. All of these little things matter. It's not like one, silver bullet. It's a lot of small things that show that you're paying attention and that you're aware. So that's it for this portion. And then I was just going to plug my Lady Coders conference, but we can do that in a minute. I can take questions first if there are any. And I'm not on Blue Jeans, so hold on. Let me go back.
Elaine, that was amazing. I have lots of notes.
So do I.
Okay, I know. I saw you. Okay, so should I stop sharing? Hold on, I can't see everybody. How does this work?
Yeah, you can, I think it's at the bottom of the screen, you can exit your full screen mode.
There we go. Now I can see everyone. Okay.
Cool. Yeah, so we're going to open it up for questions. I would just start off by saying thank you so much. I think this is something that we've been talking about a lot. We opened a little less than a year ago in Grand Junction, and have been seeing a lot of people who are kind of similar to us, whether it's guys. It's been older demographic too, but we're saying, man, we really want more women entrepreneurs here. And actually, from your suggestion, because we spoke a couple of weeks ago, and you're like, you need to go talk to women and invite them in the space, and we did that and had like huge success from it. So,
Good.
great advice. Yeah.
Excellent. What was I going to say? Yeah, and the other part of my presentation that I wasn't able to say is that it's not that the men in tech are wrong or there's anything wrong with them. I feel like the industry as a whole has started to overcorrect a little and say, okay, well, we're going to get rid of our beer and ping pong. That's not it, actually. Inclusiveness is you have beer and ping pong, and you have maternity leave, and you have on-site childcare, and you have holistic healing services. It's both. It's not to say that all those guys and what they want is wrong. It's to say that that's only catering to them. Let's include other things that cater to other people as well. And you can't make everybody happy, but you shouldn't ignore everyone else as well.
Elaine, I have a question. You said that it was important to share your statistics of the diverse populations that are using your space. Is there a best practice or best way, or how do you present that information to the people that are in your space or the people that are viewing your location to contemplate, being there, going there, becoming a member? How do you portray that information to the public,
and how do you procure it?
Yeah, how do you procure it? So definitely on your website, I would have a section. You can do this a couple different ways, and I'll look and see if I have any examples, because I have examples from corporations. I don't know that I have any examples from co-working spaces, so you guys might be the first, but I can show you what companies do. But essentially just say, look, here are our values as a co-working space, and it's important for us to be diverse, and I would say what that means, and we've hosted meetups for these organizations, or we have 3 women-owned businesses and we're growing. So I would definitely also, this would be another thing I would suggest, and I didn't get a chance to in my presentation, is actually know the makeup of your organization, of your co-working space. A lot of companies don't. Going back to those statistics at the very beginning, it was so revolutionary for Google to publish that, because everyone like myself that was in the industry knew it was a problem, but there were no statistics behind it. So I would, if I were you guys, take stock. So let's say you have 20 companies, find out a little bit more about them. And I would publish here are the ones in manufacturing, here are the ones in high tech, here are women owned, here's, we have a percentage of veterans, so that you're showing the whole makeup of proximity space, not just, it doesn't have to be just race and gender, but it can also be the types of companies you have as well. I would put it all in there. The other thing I would do too is I would put a disclaimer that just says, we're, what do you call it? A really inclusive organization. We welcome everyone. And you could even spell it out and say the LGBTQ community is welcome here. We really want to help veterans, just list out how inclusive you are. And so what I think that looks like is having a page about the space and who fills the space and what a great community you have built, and maybe some percentages that you're working, and what is the makeup of those companies, and where do we want to build to? We want to get to 30% women-owned businesses, right? Or we want to get to 10% veteran-owned businesses. So set some goals for yourself, and you can publish those goals or not. But then you also know where you need to head towards.
Awesome. How do you collect that data? How do you ask people if they're a veteran or what their ethnicity is, or how do you collect that information?
Totally. Yeah, in a way that's not intrusive. So what I do are optional surveys. So you could just do a Google form survey and ask questions. And what I would do is say it's anonymous, and make sure it's anonymous, and say we're trying to figure out the makeup of our of our co-working space. And we want to make sure that we are building as strong a community as possible. And I would also throw in other questions in there that are both about them, but then also, have you ever felt excluded? Have you, what do you think is missing from the community here? So you can get an anonymous read on some of that as well. So just, I would throw it into a survey. And I would say it's anonymous and it's optional. We just want to make this a better environment. So please fill this, take 5 minutes and please fill this out and see what comes back.
Good. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
So I have a question. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Great. So are there any co-working spaces in Colorado that have like 30 to 50% of women as their members that we could look at for these areas that you've identified in terms of services we can provide?
I actually don't know. I'm not as familiar. Do you know, Brian?
Yeah. There's actually another. There's a couple all-female co-working spaces that have opened up in Denver. So
That's right, there are
specifically for women. I'm spacing their names right now, but I could get those and try to send them out.
Yeah, I'm spacing on their names as well. I'm sorry, but yeah, they're definitely, there are at least one or two that have opened up. I would also say this is really minor but important. One of the things that's important to women are bathrooms. So clean bathrooms, bathrooms that are stocked with items that women use. I have to tell you, my first day at that stand-up, where I had the stand-up meeting, the bathrooms they were unisex, but only men used them. And I literally felt like I was in a men's locker room, trying to use their bathroom because only men ever used them. And this was also in Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In, because she's always on boards of directors where there are only men, and they didn't even know where the women's restroom was in their building because women were never there. So just, something to keep in mind.
Great feedback.
Are there
any other questions?
I have a question. Well, I don't know if it's more of a question or a comment. This is very interesting because I find that we are in kind of the opposite boat. We probably have about 80% women. We're co-working, but we cater to not just business professionals, but wellness professionals and creatives. So I'd say probably 80% again of our members are massage therapists, acupuncturists, therapists, actors, singing coaches, that kind of thing. So we were finding ourselves really struggling with reaching the tech world and being very misunderstood in the tech world is like, you're not a real co-working center. So so we were kind of on the opposite side of the fence. It was really, It's been tough to break through to that. I feel like we're finally making some headway. We just rebranded our business center and, started consulting or getting consultants on board, techies, because I don't speak that language. So I don't know the right megabytes, hertz, whatever internet speed that we need and the high-tech monitors and all of that stuff. So that's been a huge struggle for us. Like, even though we have all of this stuff, I don't think we were communicating it properly. And so we were kind of like just misunderstood and missing the mark in that target market. So that's been really tough for us.
So I will tell you that one of the best co-working spaces I've ever worked at, actually it is the best, is in Boulder, and it is called The Studio. And it was actually for artists and creatives. But as somebody in a different industry, I really liked being around artists and people it was all like artists, architects, people in the creative space like you're talking about. And I really enjoyed that because it got me out of my mindset. So I'd be at my desk coding and doing all this, technical stuff. And then I would go down to the co-working area, the communal space, and I would get to talk to an artist. I would get to see their work, like what they just painted. So I would it sounds like you already started the rebranding process for your co-working space, because it sounded to me like there was a messaging missing there, like you said. And I would definitely talk to the proximity space guys like Brian about the level of technology you need to attract the high tech guys. But then I would make sure that you have a communal space where, and one of the selling points is, hey, interact with creative minds, and take a break from some of the higher tech world that you're in and interact with people that are not like yourselves. And it was a really nice thing. I really, really loved that co-working space for that reason. So I definitely think yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. Once we get people in the door, it's not too hard, because once they realize they can go upstairs to the studio or, take an hour break at lunch and get a massage or whatever, then they're like, wow, this is freaking cool. Like, this is the place to be.
Oh, yeah, massage on site? Are you kidding?
Right?
Yeah, we need to add that.
Like front and
That's
center.
awesome.
I'll send you the bill.
Okay.
Yeah. I was going to say, it goes for both ways. Like, you bring up a good point, which is I primarily focused on the how homogenous the tech industry is, but it goes the other direction as well. In education, it's primarily women, right? And in the creative space where you are, it's primarily a female demographic. And so it goes both ways. Diversity is both sides. And so it's the same idea, which is go to tech meetups, join software development groups, and go there and just stand up for the first 5 minutes and say, I have an awesome co-working space. We'll give you the first day free, because like you said, once they're there, they'll see it and say, for anyone that's a software developer, here's our high-speed internet, here's what you get. And by the way, we have massage on site and some really cool creative talent in the building. So yeah, you still have the same thing. You got to build a new network. You have to go outside your comfort zone.
It's so
and
funny.
We did start doing that. We now host a tech meetup group, and we've been invited to speak at a tech meetup group. So it's starting to happen. It's still a little bit of a struggle. I think the biggest thing is we have a meeting with someone that's going to actually give us some consulting for like a barter. So that's going to be helpful. But my other question was, you had mentioned kind of showcasing the diversity and, how many veterans, how many women owned, how many minorities, that kind of thing. So we are a women owned business, but I'm a veteran. So is that something, like, it's so weird to just kind of put out there like, hey, I'm a veteran. Like, how do you do, how would we go about doing that? And is it something we should do?
I think so. I don't know what your website looks like, but if you personally have a biography on there, or, I would put it in your biography. I would also just state it in the About Us. We're women owned. One of the founders is a veteran, and we run a really inclusive co-working space, and we want to make sure that everyone feels welcome. I would also use your veteran status to go and speak at a veteran business group, and also offer your co-working space there as well.
Well, it's so funny because, thinking about events and stuff, again, like what we're talking about is you attract people like you, right? And I'm like, oh man, we just have all these, like, our demographic. And then it's like, well, we've done 100 meetups towards like startup and tech people, and so that's who our space is filled with. But there's to think about, there's all these different groups that are filled with, all sorts of different people that are doing meetups that are completely different than ours, and we've never attended any of those, or we've never offered to host them at our space or anything like that. So it is really interesting to think about.
I think it's great. No, especially because you have space. Like, it's such an easy play for you.
Yeah.
Like, it's so easy to invite the Hispanic Chamber to use your conference room. You know what I mean? Like, it's such an easy way to gain access to groups that are normally closed off to others.
It's like zero cost and super helpful for them because they're looking for spaces. So
Yeah. And then I would also, as you get further along in having a relationship with them, maybe they come and they use your space and maybe they come back every month and you build a relationship, then you can start asking the harder questions like, how do we get more businesses here that are part of the Hispanic Chamber? Like, what are we missing? What's not welcoming to them? What is, it's hard to have that conversation initially, but like after building a relationship, you can just ask, what are we missing in our co-working space that would make it better for your members to be here?
Yeah.
Linnea, I'm sorry. I think it's called the Broadview of Denver.
The Broadview? Okay.
Yeah, the Broadview.
Right. And then our space won't be available until August, but it sounds like it might be a good idea for us to find a venue where we can start maybe hosting meetups. I don't know. What do you think about that? Try to identify these diverse members.
I would say yes, or you could just contact the organizers and start building a relationship and go and talk about the co-working space that's coming. And offer up space to them, offer up space to the meetup itself when it opens, but also just, go to X meetup and stand up and say, hey, where this co-working space is coming, it's going to open XYZ, maybe invite that group to the launch party. Just start building a relationship. So you don't necessarily have to host the meetup, but you could start attending their gatherings and making announcements. And you have to ask the organizers this and whatnot, but build the relationship.
I would say build a relationship, but like for us, when we opened ours, we did a lot of meetups before because every time we hosted it, we could have people sign up so that we could keep them updated. And, so we did meetups and we're like, oh, we're going to meet at this bar since we don't have a location, or we had a friend who owned a business that welcomed us and said, oh, we'll host you for the night. And so we did free meetups and we bought some beer and wine and invited people over and kept the cost really low. But then every time we did a meetup, we would have a registration page where we'd say RSVP here, and then we'd say, oh, we're going to put you in our newsletter so that you can find out more information about when we're going to open and what it's going to look like. And then when we found the location that we were going to be at, we were able to do tours before we ever even signed a contract. So we were able to fill a large portion of the spaces or all the offices that we had in our co-working space before we ever signed a contract. And so that was only done because we hosted a lot of meetups beforehand.
Very cool.
Thank you.
Yep. Awesome. Well, I know that everyone's busy. I think we're about out of time. Elaine, thank you so much. This was amazing. We'll also we recorded it today. We remembered because I always forget. So we'll post it as well. I know this is going to be really helpful for a lot of different spaces. So thank you so much for your time.
You're very welcome. Thank you all.
Yes, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.